If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Julia, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 150 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for another amazing milestone, 150 episodes. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Who knew when this was just a podcast dream that one day we would be celebrating 150 episodes together? I remember having Burt Ward, Robin from Batman, on my 50th episode. It was such a huge, big deal. Still is, but that was 100 episodes ago. Can't believe it. So much goodness. So much goodness. Thanks to every one of you for all this, all your support and love. It means the world to me. Today's guest, Gary Kroeger. That's right. From Saturday Night Live, 1982 to 85, Gary rocked 30 Rockefeller Plaza. That's right. Gary and I talk all about Saturday Night Live, those early 80s years. Those were the years coming off the Belushi Aykroyd years, the 5 years with Lorne Michaels. After he left, things changed. We dive deep into it. You're going to love it. No stone unturned. We also go deep into another movie, Archie, Riverdale and Back. Who can forget? Gary Kroeger was the original Reggie Mantle from Archie. So hang on to your seats. We got a lot coming up in just a few seconds. In these few seconds, I want to remind you, check out last week's episodes. Episode 149 with comedian Kathy Ladman. Amazing conversation. Episode 148, Christian Gunnier from Stranger Things. If you love Stranger Things, check out my conversation with Christian. If you love comedy, check out my conversation with Kathy. If you love Saturday Night Live, well, you're at the right place because we're about to talk to Gary Kroeger. Gary shines light on being discovered for Saturday Night Live with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Brad Hall, working on Saturday Night Live during the heyday of Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo, working with Billy Crystal, Martin Short, Christopher Guest. So much packed into this. We got great Ringo Starr, Robert Blake stories. You're going to walk away thinking, wow, I would have paid triple for this episode and gotten my money's worth. Well, lucky for you, it's completely free. And here it is, my conversation with Gary Kroeger. Enjoy. All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest, actor, writer, improviser, podcaster, hailing from the Practical Theater Company. Loved him on Saturday Night Live, Archie to Riverdale and Back again. The big pic, the big
I don't hear
picture,
that
the Newlywed Game revival. America's #1 clock watcher, Gary Kroeger. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff, those are some credits I don't very often hear. Now, I loved Archie and Riverdale and Back, and we can talk about that if you want. It never went anywhere, but I loved it. But no one's ever mentioned it before. It's the first time there's a fan of Archie to Riverdale.
Okay, let's start there. Since we have naturally gone in that direction. I love that movie. And it was funny, when you do research, digging in, and you're like, oh, my God, that's right. Gary was Reggie, right?
That was Reggie.
And I was like, but you know what? It doesn't get enough credit because that was the first live action Archie.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was an interesting project. And I'll tell you a little story behind it. I have trouble putting dates on anything, but probably we're talking 1990 or somewhere in there. And I was just asked to come in to read for a show called Seinfeld, which was on the air. And it was friends of mine, of course, Julia and Larry David from Saturday Night Live. It wasn't an offer of the part. It was just to come in and meet on a role. Couldn't even tell you what the role was. But the show was at the bottom of the ratings at the time. And that wasn't the reason for me not going in to read. It was I had just accepted Archie to Riverdale and Back, which was 5 days of work for an ungodly amount of money for 5 days of work. And it was a back end pilot. So I could see this becoming sort of a comic 30-something, right? That was the idea. was Archie meets 30-something. And I thought, okay, this has got legs. So I had already committed to it and it would have conflicted. And I didn't want to tell Larry or even Julia, hey, I accepted your job, but now I have to turn you down. It would have been bad for him, right? So I did Archie to Riverdale and Back, which obviously went nowhere. But I heard later that they were really hurt and that Larry David was kind of pissed off. And once you piss off Larry, he's pissed off for possibly a decade. And so I never got brought back in on Seinfeld. He did bring me in on a Curb Your Enthusiasm in 2003 or so, which I loved. But all that time, I assumed Larry David hated me for turning down a Seinfeld audition and doing Archie to Riverdale and Back.
Well, in hindsight,
isn't hindsight something? In hindsight, but I would have been a footnote, some character, I don't know who. I think there was a relationship with Elaine somewhere in there. And yeah, the residuals would be a lot better. And I would be in that world. But you never know at the time. I thought bigger part, has legs, good paycheck. I think I made the intelligent decision, just not the, I didn't have a crystal ball, did I?
No, look, I'm going to admit a few things. One, when I saw it on your IMDb and I was reminded of this gem, which I completely remembered, stuck in my head from young Jeff Dwoskin watching TV. Specifically, if I may be 100% honest, the Lauren, Holly, Betty seduction scene of Archie. Right. So
Karen Copens and Lauren, two beautiful, beautiful women who are just starting their careers, really. And yeah, it was fun to go into the makeup wagon and see the two of them every morning. Beautiful, lovely cast. Chris Rich, lovely cast.
It was a fun cast. And I tell you, I rewatched it. I found it on YouTube. Rewatched it because I'm like, I got. Sometimes you want to replay those memories, right? It was good. It could have gone somewhere. I don't know why. It was good enough. It was very well done for like Archie kind of bringing it to life. It was enjoyable.
If I may be somewhat modest, I'm a very nice guy. I'm an easy guy to get to know and affable. So for me to play kind of an a-hole, Reggie was a fun departure for me. And I felt that I did him quite well. I thought I did him justice. The courtroom scene, I thought was pretty funny stuff.
You were a great Reggie. You were a big jerk to Pop Tate and you wanted to take down his soda shop.
I sure did, didn't I?
You look at Gary Kroeger and you're like, damn,
I had that cutout of Reggie, who was me, like this at all of his workout facilities for years and years and years. I carried that cutout with me. I really enjoyed it. I think what happened at that time, the early 90s, that was a cartoony thing, good idea, but things were getting much more serious. They wanted 30-something. They wanted real drama, not Reggie and Archie having drama. So it just, didn't go anywhere. I have a lot of those. The Shaggy Dog, The Return of the Shaggy Dog was, I thought, a very charming Disney movie that I did around the same time or a little bit earlier. And it had legs to go places, could have been a series, but, it was just another movie of the week that went nowhere.
That was in 1987. That was after Saturday Night Live.
That was indeed, yes, a couple of years. Yeah.
What eventually kind of determines whether one of these backdoor pilots will actually get made? Is it ratings?
Well, if it gets tremendous ratings, obviously, that's a big deal. Everything sort of is a back-end pilot because you want to keep those actors in case you get the idea that, hey, this could go somewhere. You want to already have them contracted. Great ratings would have made a difference. I think it probably did well. I don't recall. And great reviews make a difference. And I think that those kinds of shows were basically treated not as heavy substance. There wasn't a lot of gravitas to it. So it was really easy to dismiss it, in the reviews. And if the numbers didn't go through the roof, it just went into the heap of nice ideas and that go nowhere.
The current Riverdale, right, which is what everyone probably thinks, did have one of their episodes named to Riverdale and Back Again in homage to your movie.
Do you think it was really out of respect for my movie that they figured
because
enough people remembered it?
They pick movies, I think, to name their episodes. And so it was absolutely. And the director of your movie was Dick Dower. He did Smoking the Bandit 3, Gambler 3 and 4, Project L.
Well, and Paul Haggis wrote, did he write Archie to Riverdale and Back? Paul Haggis? Or he wrote one of the films I did. It might have been The Return of the Shaggy Dog.
John L. Goldwater. No, that was his character. Evan Katz.
He went on to many things as well. I remember Paul Haggis after Return of the Shaggy Dog, and this this is what I would live for, is he came up to me and said, Kroeger, you hit every beat. That to me is a fulfillment of my contract, what I'm supposed to do. He said, you never missed your mark. I mean, whether it was a line or just being prepared as an actor. And I took that, obviously 35 years later, and I still remember him saying that. It meant something to me.
That's awesome. It's those little words that people say to people.
Yeah. Well, I did the best that I could. And so the writer producer said, you hit every note. That's what he said. And okay, great. And you remember it.
You're the first
first living Reggie.
You're the first living Reggie. So you got that. That's trivia that you can die with right there.
Well, you know what? I just might put that on Facebook today. That might become my status today.
You should. All right, let's go. Let's talk about, I'm looking at my notes, and apparently there's other stuff we can talk.
Oh, yeah, there's other stuff.
Oh, man. I will say your years in Saturday Night Live, those were like my first years of watching Saturday Night Live. You know what I mean?
You were target audience. So you were 14 or younger,
yeah, like
right?
12 to 15 during your years. And so that was sort of like how I got introduced to Saturday Night Live, was you and Julia and Eddie and Joe Piscopo and all that. And so it is a thrill. It's a real thrill to talk to you, because it's such a cemented thing in my head.
Well, I appreciate that. And I should take the compliment and say thank you, but it can't be a thrill. I mean, you don't have goosebumps or anything. It's a mild thrill, right? It's a pleasing sensation.
Well, I do this podcast because I love to talk to people that at some point in my life, in a pop culture way, kind of were there and embedded in my head. So yeah, it is awesome to be able to talk to you. Yeah.
You're very kind. Yeah. I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
I mean, I wish I had Julia, but you are...
Look, believe me, I get it. I'd rather have Julia or Eddie, absolutely.
But only you return my calls.
The way I've always looked at that, my period there, is I was a footnote in history. If the show were Led Zeppelin, I was a roadie. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not in the band exactly, but I was there. I witnessed Eddie Murphy's explosion onto the scene from really humble Saturday Night Live presence to a superstar in films. I got to watch that happen. I watched Billy Crystal and Marty Short and Chris Guest improvise. I had a bird's eye view of some amazing parts of television history.
I just want to take a quick break. Thank everyone for the support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here, Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. Now back to Gary Kroeger. I'm about to take him back in time, and Gary's going to share some memories of being part of the Practical Theater. I also found it amazing. Now let's go back in time and then work back up to Saturday Night Live, like the time in the Practical Theater Company. And what was it even before that even got you?
Well, they got maybe in my life, or the Practical Theater in particular.
No, what even got you interested in doing comedy and improv and meeting Brad and Julia and forming this troupe?
Well, it's interesting. It's a great question too, because I think people who are interested in these things benefit from hearing somebody that carved out some kind of a life in it. I've wanted to be a performer as long as I could remember, and this sounds cute, but the fact is I would make the Avon lady laugh. And that became a drug, what you can make your family laugh. I was the funny person in a very intellectual academic family. I'm not an intellectual or academic, but the rest of my family is. And I was the funny guy. So once you find that niche in life, you become the wisecracker at school. You imitate all the teachers. You get involved in all the plays. So that was sort of my destiny as long as I could remember. But I really wasn't interested in comedy, even though I was getting laughs. It just told me that I wanted to perform. And when I got involved with theater, especially in high school and then in college, it was dramatic theater that interested me. It was Arthur Miller. It was Tennessee Williams. It was Chekhov. These are the things that I felt could move people. And I felt that I had a deep reservoir to draw from. But you go where the opportunity is. I fell in with friends like Brad Hall and Julia Louis-Dreyfus and a host of other names, but those in particular, you probably know. And we were creating theater on the fly at Northwestern. We did Brecht, we did original shows, but the glue that kept the Practical Theater together and drew the biggest audiences were improv comedy shows. We approached all of it with kind of an intellectual point of view. We didn't want to just do silly comedy. We wanted it to be political. We wanted to make social statements. So we developed this reputation as being guerrilla, quasi-intellectual, collegiate comedians. Well, that led to a big show in Chicago, which led to Saturday Night Live. And then once you're painted with that brushstroke, comedian, Saturday Night Live, it's like Al Pacino. Once you think you're out, they pull you back in. You just can't get away from it. You know, I would go to auditions. Oh, it's the comedian. I go, I'm not really a comedian. I don't do jokes. You know, I've thought that the majority of my career.
So do you just consider yourself a humorous observer of nature?
Yeah, I'm an actor and I'm a reasonably funny guy. You know, I think I'm good conversation. I'm quick with with witty repartee, perhaps. But I've always thought of myself as an actor, and I try harder and harder to get back into it. But it's difficult.
How did you find a kind of a kinship with Brad Hall, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Paul Barros?
Barros. Yeah, Rush Pearson, Paul Barros, Rush Pearson, Jeff Lupin, and Bill Ronsky, Jane Muller. I mean, just a host of fantastic people. It's hard. Did I meet them at a frat party? Maybe at a dormitory party, perhaps. Northwestern Theater is very intense, and it's a very reputable organization, right? Northwestern Theater, it's almost conservatory-like training. So people who are really anxious to do things have a tendency to do them on their own rather than wait for university theater to catch up with them. You audition for a show, maybe you didn't get in, but you still want to perform. So we sort of found ourselves looking at each other going, let's do stuff. Let's do stuff. We have all these ideas. Let's do stuff. Paul and Brad initially created the Attack Theater, which became the Practical Theater. And it just sort of drew people like me and Julia into it. And we became, you know, real collaborators and real friends. It was a window of probably 79 to 82, 3 years. But in that time, we produced a lot of material. The dam eventually burst, and that's when Saturday Night Live came by in 1982 and said, hey, would you come to New York? Okay. You know, at that time, that was a good decision. I made a good decision on the spot. I said, yeah, I'll go to New York and let you pay me.
How did they become aware of you?
Two things, I think. We were right next door to Second City. In fact, Second City sold our audience their drinks to make money off of us. They gave us the space to build, and we put on our own show next to Second City. I don't know that Second City at that particular Bernie Solins, who ran Second City, and Joy Sloan were tired of Saturday Night Live rating their cast. You know, Belushi, all of those people, Bill Murray, they all came from there. And then the show is kind of crippled, the theater show, because they all went off to Saturday Night Live. So I think, as legend has it, Bernie said, check out the kids next door. They got a cute little show, a lot of energy. Go check out those kids. So Dick Ebersol, Bob Tischler, and others came to see the show and literally closed us on a Saturday Night after our Saturday show because they wanted us in New York on Monday or something crazy like that. So I had Sunday to sit there and go, well, I guess I could. Am I going to move out, sell the Pinto, and move out of my little one-bedroom studio apartment in Chicago and move to New York? Okay, yeah, I'll do that. It was like that. It really was magical.
So part of the magic was Second City didn't want to lose any of their people.
Yeah.
Hey, God bless them.
So they were happy to well, and we had a great chemistry. And Paul was brought along as a writer on the show, too, that first year. But we had a great chemistry, me and Julia and Brad and Paul. And that was the entire cast at that time. So I think it was easy to look at these very young people with these very physical ideas and say, okay, they will plug in nicely. Now, that's the good part of the story. The bad part of the story is we didn't really plug in that easily into Saturday Night Live. Physical stuff was not what they did. They tell jokes, they create characters, catchphrases. It wasn't really the kind of stuff that we were doing. So we were very out of place, especially that first year.
But the talent that they grabbed of the four of you, I didn't know Paul's name when I first wrote it down, but I looked him up, and his IMDb is so impressive. Remember, he created one of my favorite shows, Behind the Music.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But that's just like, that just scratches the surface. So the four of you are insane talent. I mean, we all know now in hindsight what crazy talent they kind of grabbed. How did you feel, though? I'm sure you felt great because it was Saturday Night Live coming off what a lot of people consider like those iconic 5 years with like Belushi and Aykroyd, et cetera, and Gilda.
Well, we would be 2 years after the iconic 5 years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so season 6 right? As the history goes, correct me if I'm wrong, season 6, Lauren just wanted a break after season 5. They're like, no, we're just plugging ahead. So they hire Jean Dominion. Right? And then she pulls together some folks. She gets fired mid-season. Dick Ebersol takes over. Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo start to become the stars of the show.
I think they're the only two he retained.
Right. He fires everybody.
Including Gilbert Gottfried.
Gilbert Gottfried, may he rest in peace.
And then he brought together Tim Kazurinsky and Robin Duke, Mary Gross.
Laurie Metcalf was featured.
It was featured. I believe she was offered, but it's not what she wanted to do. They retained Eddie and Joe. Eddie and Joe, particularly Eddie, became the stars of the show. Eddie, by 1982, the 81-82 season, according to Dick Ebersol, I don't want to say he was getting lazy, but he was getting disinterested in Saturday Night Live because he started doing films. They hadn't come out yet, but he was getting film offers because he was the big star on SNL. One of the reasons that they went looking for new energy was to put a fire under Eddie. That's one of the reasons we were hired. And perhaps it did light a fire because when we got there, there was very little room for us in the Eddie Murphy show featuring Joe Piscopo.
Right.
The others, particularly Tim Kazurinsky, is so prolific, they found their space on the show. But for me, Brad and Julia, it was very tough going. You know, we considered ourselves the Professor and Mary Ann before they got the song credit. We were And the Rest. That's a Gilligan's Island reference. Maybe it predates you.
No, I got it. I was singing it in my head. That's why.
And the rest. Well, that's what we were. You know, Brad and I would say to each other, "Are you cop number 1 or cop number 2?" You know, I mean, those are the roles that we got, with a few exceptions.
Right. Your first season was season 8, right? So season 7, when they rebuilt the cast, and then they added Mary Gross.
And Christine Ebersol. No relation.
Brian Doyle Murray was featured. Tony Rosato.
Yeah.
Was there. So now this is probably the year where Eddie and Joe really kind of established themselves. So then you kind of came into that.
Yes. And they didn't know what to think of us because we were very theatrical. Nobody had heard of us. We were a fish out of water. We didn't know the medium. Our ideas, again, were very physical, very cerebral. And it just, they looked at us like, what on earth are they doing here? It took a while to prove ourselves to them. I think we did eventually, but...
How did you connect with the rest of the cast, like Robin Duke and Mary Gross and Tim?
Well, Robin and Mary and Tim all came from Second City, and they came from theatrical backgrounds. And so they sort of they embraced us. They understood that, hey, we're no different than you are. It was just like this for us last year. They were very, very kind, but they were also fighting for their own space on the show. Again, you know, these aren't sour grapes. If I'm producing Saturday Night Live and I've got Eddie Murphy, I'm going to give him everything I can. And Joe Piscopo takes some lumps, I think, these days. But, you know, he was a workhorse and he could do anything. If he worked on an impression, he would nail it after 2 or 3 days. And so he really was, in a way, the Phil Hartman of our era.
I agree with that.
Just a workhorse. And the two of them were such good friends and had such great chemistry that, you know, they put them together as Stevie Wonder and Frank Sinatra and Solomon and Pudge and all of these things that really were the meat and potatoes of the show.
Yeah, Joe, I have the same kind of memories as Joe Piscopo, it being so solid, Eddie just being hilarious.
Solid.
And then I have it's funny, I don't know if it's just the memory and then reinforced by what clips I can find online, but it seems like you were, every one of the clips you're in, Julia is in that clip. You guys were in a lot of clips together. I mean, that's not a bad thing. It was just an observation.
Well, Julia and I were very, very tight. I mean, she was already with Brad Hall and they would be married a couple of years later. But I think I knew Julia before Brad. We were a very tight group and Julia and I just fit together. We looked like we could be a couple. We were the right size for each other. You know, Brad's 8'6", you know, and Julia is, 5'2". Julia and I matched up very well as Donnie and Marie or whatever it was. So yeah, we were put together quite often.
That's a skit that everyone always mentions as like one of the classics is you and it's Julia as Donnie Marie. I could not find it online to save my life.
We did it 3 times. Same joke. Incest. Brothers, sisters sing together, get closer, make out. Next week, they sing together, she's pregnant. I mean, it's just low humor. It didn't even build with jokes. It was just the one joke, but people remember it.
It's just so fun.
Who am I?
Hey,
who am I to argue?
You can't question it. So during these seasons, Harry Anderson, frequent guest.
Yeah. Harry was, there. Joel Hodgson, Harry Anderson, nicest guys. Stephen Wright, just unassuming, nice people. I got to do Night Court years later with Harry, and we swapped stories about the SNL days. He was authentic and as kind as he appeared to be. He really was.
I loved Harry on Saturday Night Live, and every time he showed up on Cheers.
Well, I showed up on Cheers.
I love Night Court too. I mean, pre-Night Court.
Led to Night Court.
Yeah.
But that persona really was Harry. Just unassuming, brilliant with his sleight of hand. Yeah, so approachable. Love the man.
I'm looking at first season. So there's a few things of note during the first season I found is that Drew Barrymore hosted, youngest person ever to host it. It's 7.
7 years old.
And then I didn't realize the timing of it, but it was this season, your first season, that they voted Andy Kaufman off of Saturday Night Live forever.
Yeah. And that's something that comes up once in a while because I'm the one that announced it. And I didn't really know what the flavor, the tempo, the mood of it was. I'm in the cast. I'm on the show. And I thought it was all set up. I thought it was just a big hoax. So when I played it to the camera, I cringe now when I see it because rather than there was no subtlety to me. I'm sort of announcery and things like that. And then I announced that he was voted off the show. I found out later that it was real and that he was genuinely hurt.
Why did they do that?
They did a thing the year before of dumping a lobster into the hot water or not, and people live voted on it. Larry the Lobster.
Sure.
And I think people voted to kill the lobster. It could have been Andy's idea to do something like that. Because, performance art is his thing, real time, things like that. But a very nice, gentle man. But I think he assumed that he was popular and that people liked him on the show. And I'm just guessing, and we can't ask him now. But what I heard and what I saw of his face afterwards was a very defeated guy. So I've never been comfortable with that and my part in it.
Sorry to interrupt this amazing conversation with Gary Kroeger, but we have to take a quick break. And we're back with Gary Kroeger. We're going to go a little bit more into this whole Andy Kaufman story, and we're back. Didn't Dick Ebersol know you didn't actually have to use the real vote? I mean, years later, things like American Idol and Last Comic Standing would also make it look like things are being voted on.
I don't remember, and maybe my memory is making things up, but it seems to me there was a standard and practices thing that if you say this is real, there were monitors to make sure that it was real and recorded correctly. Really? I remember some authentic mechanism for this to be real, and the votes came in real time. Yeah, I just, and I'm wearing a really stupid sweater in that when I announce it. It's like, I guess it's the early 80s. I'm forgiven.
At the time, it was probably great. But yeah, if you had known you were stumbling into an iconic moment.
Yeah, stumbling into something that would be forever known as part of this legendary career, I think I would have played it differently and worn better clothes.
Though I don't think watching Archie recently, you learned anything from the jackets you were wearing in that. But anyway,
big lapels, right? Yeah.
This is also the season that Buckwheat was shot.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Now that was brilliant. I would hold the Assassination of Buckwheat up with, and I love what Saturday Night Live in the last 25 years. Love it. Particularly the last 10. It's gotten very political, but now it is an edgy show again. It's a water cooler show. Adults watch it again. We were targeted for like 12-year-olds like you. I felt that the Assassination of Buckwheat was a brilliant satire on media that holds up to this day. Joe Piscopo doing Ted Koppel was absolutely brilliant. And the way they just kept showing the assassination over and over and over. It was really the beginning of oversaturation media. And Saturday Night Live took advantage of that and did a very, very good job. I played roles later as like a buckwheat impersonator because the buckwheat after death phenomenon, which we compared to Elvis, of course. David Susskind came on the show and a bunch of us buckwheat impersonators argued with each other. So I got to be part of it in that respect. And I'm pretty proud of that.
You see things and they stick with you forever. I mean, there's still times when I'll be like, have you seen the videotape?
Have you seen the videotape? Well, Joe did it perfectly. In fact, when you do imitations, you find a hook phrase. And if you ask me to do Alan Alda later, I have a hook phrase. Right before camera would roll, I would hear Joe going, I'm Ted Koppel, I'm Ted Koppel. And yes, and I can't do Ted Koppel, but Joe would perfectly be in the meter of Ted Koppel after doing I'm Ted Koppel. Have you seen the videotape?
Buckwheat has been shot.
Has been shot. We did some things in that era. Eddie's White Like Me, where he puts on whiteface.
Brilliant.
And finds out that white people on buses have parties and things like that. That was part of my era. And it holds up, I think, with any satire.
That's, again, one of the greatest skits. Let me ask you a question. These great skits of your time, and I'll throw the Needleman dating video into that pile, do you think because these are like the non-Lauren years, that sometimes in retrospectives or anything like that,
yes,
they get skipped?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. In fact, I think Lauren would bury those 4 or 5 years under the carpet, but you can't ignore Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy to this day is probably the single biggest star to emerge. And I'm talking about Will Ferrell too. Eddie's star has shone so brightly for so long that you can't ignore that era is part of Saturday Night Live. And so begrudgingly, and I'm just guessing, but we don't get included in a lot of things except for Eddie. You'll notice Joe isn't particularly involved in the anniversary shows, particularly. Eddie's the one, and Billy Crystal and Marty Short, you really can't ignore.
That's too bad. But because there was some really great stuff that came. I think it's hard to ignore any period, because no matter what anyone thinks of any period, like I hate to say this out loud, I had no opinion of the first 5 years because I really hadn't seen them. Okay.
Right.
I mean, when I was introduced to yours. So my opinion is these are, to me, what Saturday Night Live is. I went back and explored and learned and all that. But, to ignore any part of the history of the show, I think is unfortunate.
Well, I got to watch Eddie. I met Eddie Murphy, and 48 Hours hadn't come out yet. I knew that he was the star of SNL, but he was just this kid who hung out at all the meetings. He would sign his name on lampshades. He was just introducing himself to the concept of celebrity, but he was just this really young kid. And I got to watch 48 Hours come out, Beverly Hills Cop, Trading Places, and he became a superstar to where a hush would fall over the studio. You'd have 450 people in the audience, and it would be like, oh, it could have been the Beatles, the way people responded to him. And I got to witness that. Of the 3 years I was there, I would have to put I think the Billy Crystal, Marty Short, Chris Guest year, it stands out as a gem because it was a different style. It was different writing. It was different kind of characterizations, but I was there. I was part of it. And I think you could put that year next to any in the history of Saturday Night Live and say, okay, that competes.
Yeah, that year, I hate when that happens. Or Then I took the pliers and I pulled back my fingers, and
exactly. And the skin, the bamboo under your fingernails. I hate when that happens. Yeah,
that and the synchronized swimming.
Synchronized swimming stands up with anything. At the end of my second year, I did Ira Needleman. It made the best of shows a couple of times during that period. To this day, it's what people associate me with, and that was Gary. Here's $30,000. Let's do something. And Andy Kurtzman, Elliot Wald came up with this idea that it's a video dating, which just started. It was putting in VHS tape still. And I'm a nerdy dentist. And Nate Herman, I think, wrote this kind of Springsteen-esque rock and roll song that I went and recorded. And I think it holds up, even though the technology has changed. I think the nerdy dentist that metamorphosizes into this rock and roll stud with a tooth and a cape, I think it's still pretty funny.
Holds up. I watched it like 2 days ago. I was like blessed that I could find it. It was so funny. I was like, I watched this, and honestly, I wrote down, I go, this holds up with any of the best skits ever. Like I think it's easy right in the top of any of them. It is so funny.
It was so well done. And it's cheap double entendres. Let me fill you up with my drill. I mean, all of these things. But to that audience of teenagers, this was edgy stuff, really well produced. It's a good video.
Well, teenage me loved it, and adult me rewatching it on YouTube or SNL on NBC, whatever.com.
Well, we've had Broadway dancers in there as my hygienists, and they're fantastic. I mean, it was a really good production.
It was just that's what they do now. They do these huge video segments, pre-tape segments, and they kind of blow it out. It was right in line with that. You were the forefather of everything the Lonely Island later came to be. Andy Samberg owes you a thank you now.
I make my kids watch some of that stuff. My oldest is almost 23. My era so predates his whole sensibility, frames of reference, sense of humor, that I don't think he really finds anything that I ever did particularly funny.
Not at all.
Or any of my children. No, not at all. You'd like to think that they'd show their friends. I don't know that they do. I don't know if they do.
It's hard. It's hard for the kids because they see you so differently, right? And so,
well, I'm dad.
Right.
So to see dad in spandex with a cape, maybe that's upsetting. And in fact, I seem to recall I stripped down to sequined.
Yeah, you're pretty
shorts.
much all the way down.
I'm pretty naked in that thing. Yeah, that might be hard. I can't imagine seeing my father.
And then they put probably whipped cream, but toothpaste.
Well, it was whipped cream, but of course it was supposed to be toothpaste. Right. Yes.
So
and brushed my chest. So all of you at home who haven't seen it, I'm sure that's enough that you're going to want to download. You go to the NBC website, you can get a lot of that stuff. I think Donnie and Marie's there, Ira Needleman.
Yeah. Oh, it's all. You just type in Gary Kroeger at NBC SNL, whatever it is.
And you'll get a few.
Yeah. There's a good selection. Another really good one is the Superman one with Christopher Reeve auditions. That's a good one too.
I was very proud of that one because I didn't have any direction. I made it my own. The fall, taking the bullet and all that stuff. The pompous actor. I'm not saying I made the sketch. Christopher Reeve's in the sketch. He's Superman. But I thought that was really well played by everyone. And I got a nice big laugh from being murdered by Richard Donner.
Played by Jim Belushi. What was it like for Jim Belushi? Because he joined your second year. He joined season 9.
Yeah.
This is like a year and a half after his brother passed away.
Yeah. Well, Jim was... Jim and I are in great terms. Now, we don't hang out or anything, but I saw him at the SNL reunion. It was very, very friendly. And he actually apologized to me several years ago because during SNL, he wasn't that nice to me. And not because I was any kind of threat, but he perceived me as one. For some reason, he targeted me as the person who was going to take roles from him. So Robin Duke was on my show, the Gary and Kenny show, and she said, "Oh yeah, Jim would close the door and talk about that he would say, 'Oh, I can see through Kroeger's nice act. He's is insincere and he's a shark.'" And so he really had it out for me. But at the same time, we did a lot of things together. We did the Bulge, where he sees me stuff my pants to get girls in a bar. We did the shoplifting thing where I'm the storekeeper and he steals the entire store. We did a couple of Red Guys where we did a rap together as a couple of Soviet defectors. So the funny thing is we did We Are the World together. We had great chemistry. You know, some of my favorite stuff was with Jim.
The term is probably projection. No, I'm not. I can't even imagine. We don't, what it would, the pressure on Jim Belushi to come into Saturday Night Live with the name Belushi. Yeah.
And let's face it, it's only a year after his brother died. It seemed like, a big span of time. No, not at all. John died in March of 82. We're there in September of 82. Jim's there the very next year. All of us made the mistake of seeing Jim in the hallway and say, "Hey, Jim, I'm sorry." And I remember Jim turning to me once and said, "You get 2, meaning you can make this mistake twice, 3 times, and I probably belt you." But I understood. His brother's shadow was huge. And Jim is a very talented guy. And he wanted to carve his own niche. He knew that the name Belushi opened the door, but that's where he wanted the door to close and be his own man. So I got it. I understood.
Yeah, no, Jim was very funny on his own, in his own way, I think. And so,
oh yeah.
But yeah,
a better actor in a way, I think, than John. John had a charisma that's nobody has equaled. I can't think of anybody. Chris Farley, maybe, I don't know. But there was a danger to John too. None of those things Jim had, but Jim's a very good actor. He played comedy very sincerely, very real. And I was impressed by him.
No, I agree. Also, so you mentioned the season 3 cast that they brought on because they stacked the season 3 cast with Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
So Eddie Murphy leaves, Joe Piscopo leaves. And they bring in Billy Crystal, Christopher Guest, Martin Short, Harry Shearer, and Pamela Stevenson. So basically, except for Michael McKean, the entire cast of Spinal
Tap. Right. I think Michael was asked too, for that matter.
I know he hosted that season and later.
Yeah.
So interestingly, when he hosted that season, they sang, McKean, Shearer, and Christopher Guest sang Old Joe's Place as the folksman, which later...
Yeah, the folksman, right.
Which later was the exact song
the folksman.
The Mighty Wind.
The Mighty Wind.
Yeah.
All of Chris's movies I've loved. I've got to do one. I was in The Big Picture, which really was one of his first films, if not his first film post SNL. And he gave me a nice day role that's memorable on The Big Picture. But I've enjoyed all of his films. I just think they're brilliant.
Throw clamshells. See, I did my...
There you go.
I did my research. There you go.
What? And what, you're now just, if you weren't a degree from Kevin Bacon already, you're now literally, what would this make you? 1 degree? 2
yeah,
degrees?
You're right there with Kevin Bacon. And that was
right. I'm on the couch with Kevin Bacon. So anybody that knows me, you're what, 2 degrees from Kevin Bacon?
Is it 1 degree? Are you 1 degree?
I don't know. Wouldn't I be 1 degree? Because I'm not Kevin Bacon.
You're with him. You're no degrees. You're like sitting on the couch.
So I'm no degrees? Okay, so you're 1 degree. I've never really figured that part out. But, Chris wrote a brilliant sketch or script, but he doesn't really tell you how to do it or what to do or how to play it. He lets you find the rhythm in there. So he has 3 cameras going. JT Walsh is over here, Kevin Bacon, I'm here, and just roll. Did it a couple of times, let me find my own beats and rhythms, threw in a few things of my own, cut, print.
Michael McKean is credited as the screenplay writer, Christopher Guest and Michael Varhol as story. Michael Varhol. Yeah. And then Christopher Guest directed it. So yeah, I love all the Christopher Guest stuff. It's fun. And so that was a connection then that kind of grew from the time at Saturday Night Live. So that's nice.
Yes.
So let me ask you my question is, so you have this amazing cast brought in season 10. You came in with the bookend of Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo. Yeah. Do you kind of feel, and then you were gone after that season, after season 10, that was your last season. Do you feel you ever had a chance, to grow, because at the end of season, they always were bringing in these giant hitters. So the feeling that you had in season 8, where you were kind of brought in to help support and spark Eddie, they brought in all these, they brought in their own top people again, instead of letting you guys grow.
And that's how I more or less look at it, looking back. At the end of the second year, the last thing I did was Needleman. I had good momentum. I finally knew what I was doing. I knew how to write for television. I had confidence as a performer. But then Dick switched up the cast. Some people left. He started new. I didn't expect to be asked back, and I don't think Julia did, or Mary. But they wanted to have some good, solid, experienced performing, probably secondary cast to support Billy and Marty and Chris. So there was room for us there. But then they're the heavy hitters, and they took the lion's share of stuff. I felt like, there would be times where Chris Guest would come up to me and say, Kroeger, can you do Robert Mitchum? And I said, give me 5 minutes, Chris. And I'd come back and go, this is my buddy. I just kind of do whatever, right? Better than that. But at the time, I worked up Robert Mitchum. So they saw me as someone of their crowd that they could rely on. They said, do you do Alan Alda? We're going to do Alan Alda for a talk show. So I went into a room and I found my hook phrase. What was it? The blood on Klinger's apron is clashing with his paisley dress. Well, I thought those are real landmines out there. I just found my sort of hook phrases in that Alan Alda face. And so they said, Kroeger, great, come on. And they kept including me. It was never to feature me. Okay. But I was part of the group. And I felt like if we had gone another year, I really would have become, because they would have wanted to do less and I would have gotten more. I felt like I had just gotten started, but Marty and Chris just wanted to do the show 1 year, Billy as well. So they all left, and Dick Ebersol wasn't interested in doing the show anymore. So the show was really over after 1985. And Lorne came back and started over, and he wasn't going to include me.
That's too bad. Right. I read that they canceled it. They were going to go.
Yeah, it was going to be Saturday Night Live, Saturday Night Wrestling or something.
Unless they could get Lorne Michaels back.
Lorne back.
And it was part of that. I read that Dick Ebersol wanted to move way more into pre-videotaped sketches and away from live. And they're like, no.
It controls the budget. It controls the comedy. It controls the timing. They're so well done, still are, maybe probably better than ever. But that film group was so tight. They were so good that I could understand wanting to do that.
Who was the guest star that you were the most excited about?
Well, that would be Ringo, bar none. Was it the best show? No, absolutely not. But I'm a huge Beatle fan. I mean, I'm a Beatle fan since I was 6 years old. Beyond idolatry. It's ridiculous. My connection. I have a left-handed Hofner bass guitar behind me right now. So hanging out with Ringo for a week, that is unequaled in my life. Telling me stories about backstage at Ed Sullivan, the Screaming Girls, teaching his son to play drums, who now plays, of course, with The Who. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. The actor that I had the most chemistry with and did really interesting things with was Howard Hessman. He did a couple of shows, and he and I, because he was an improv actor, and we did a couple of sketches together. We just learned our lines and then sort of improvised. We never look at cue cards. And I found a brother, a brother in arms with Howard Hessman. So I really adored him.
He was in The Committee.
Yeah, The Committee. I loved Chris Reeve because he was Superman. And I told Chris Reeve a story that we went out to dinner, and I told Chris a story that when I was a little boy, and this is true, I would wear my Superman suit under my clothes because I was kind of a wimpy kid. And I kept thinking, well, if somebody sees the S, they're going to go, holy crap, Kroeger is Superman. Let's not mess around with it. I mean, that's a kid's way of thinking, right?
I had no problem with that line of thinking at all.
No. So I wore a Superman suit to school, but I'd have my cape in it as well, and it would bunch up in my pants. And this girl, Julie Nielsen, said, and I can remember it was second grade, Gary Kroeger's wearing diapers. Well, I couldn't say, no, it's my cape. It's a cape. It's not a diaper. And I told Chris that story. And then later he's on a talk show and he stole the story. He told the story as if that's what he did as a boy. And I think he even told the diaper part of it. And the audience was like, oh, that's the sweetest story in the world. I'm thinking, that's me. He stole my panel.
He stole your story?
That son of a gun. He stole my story.
I would even think to do that. That is...
Because having done a couple of panel shows myself, you're so desperate for a charming story that I'm sure Superman gets up there and say, well, I just heard this great story. So I never blamed him.
True or false? You have a coffee cup containing cigarette ashes used by Ringo Starr when he hosted Saturday Night Live.
True. Right here.
Nice.
Yep. Didn't expect it to show up that quickly, did you?
I am not.
Right behind me.
That is amazing. That is absolutely so great. So cool. Do you have any that you did not enjoy?
Robert Blake.
Robert Blake. I mean, is that now or in hindsight? Or was he always like in the murdering kind of mood?
Well, I'll give you some Robert Blake story. Look, this is in lots of Saturday Night Live, the worst hosts ever, and he always makes the top 10. And the story is told that Gary Kroeger gave him a script of an idea. I think it was called. He was a philosophy professor, but his cockatoo had all the knowledge. I don't remember the skit, but he read it and he said, this is the stuff you're giving me. And he wiped his butt with it and threw it at me, hit me in the head. And the room kind of went, oh, that was rude. I wasn't hurt. I just thought, well, I guess he didn't like the script. And I thought, well, I guess, I'm a boy from Iowa. I guess this is how they do it in the big leagues. I really wasn't hurt, but the story keeps replicating. But he was never particularly charming anyway. Years later, I got to know him because he had a crush on a girl that I was dating in LA. And so I would see him around. So I'm at Vitello's, right? And he's there with his wife. And I'm having dinner and he waves at me and I wave at him. And they leave and he comes back because he forgot his gun. That was the night that his wife was murdered. So when I walked home, I didn't see anything, but I walked by the car where apparently she was dead inside.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not a witness to anything except to corroborate. Yeah, he came back for his gun. Which is
Hang on. There's
weird.
a knock on my door right now. Hang on. So you want to copy the tape?
Right. But I got to witness, this is part of Hollywood lore. The did he or did he not murder his wife? And I saw her 10 minutes before she was dead that I didn't find out till the next day. And the news is breaking and wait, that's the garbage dump. That's the car. I just walked by there, Yeah, very strange. Robert Blake looms large in my life.
I thought that story sounded familiar, and because I was just listening to an interview with Christopher Reeve, and he told the same exact story. I don't even know what to believe. I don't even know what to believe anymore.
Ringo's ashes. I mean, come on.
But you got to kind of rub elbows with John Candy hosted the Smothers Brothers, Don Rickles.
One of the nicest human beings to ever live. The Smothers Brothers, hugely generous, nice people. Most of the experiences were great. Jerry Lewis was a huge star, and Eddie and Joe do great Jerry Lewis, and they were a threesome, and they had a lot of fun. I did not find him to be a particularly warm guy. Sid Caesar, I adored because he really created the concept of Saturday Night Live with your show of shows. He was not a warm and friendly guy. But for the most part, you're dealing with actors who are out of their element, and they rely on you. They look to you as a lifesaver, and you develop really nice relationships.
That's very cool. Do you regret being pulled into the non-Lauren years? Do you wish I was discovered a couple years later? Or do you ever think about that?
I don't think I would have got, I have dreams that I'm asked back to the show because it's a classic case. I wish I knew then what I know now, because I would know how to write for it. I would be the most prolific guy there. I'm certain of it. It's not going to happen. I don't think that the circumstances, the way Lorne casts would have happened for me. I mean, I don't know that I would have, he casts people doing their stand-up, which I never had. The audition process is a lot different from what I did. I was caught in action doing theater. I did send them a tape for a request, though. That's a piece of the story that I've never figured out. Weeks before they showed up, my agent called and said, Kroeger, Saturday Night Live wants you to send them a tape. Somebody said that Kroeger is this guy they need to see. So I went on tape, and I'm doing Ed Sullivan, Beatles impressions, and Red Skelton, Barney Fife, all of these things. But I never heard hide nor hair of that. But the audition process is much different than what I think I would have excelled at. So I was caught in my element by Dick and Bob Tischler. If that had been Lorne, I don't know that he would have hired Julia, for that matter. And there is no more talented human being on the planet.
It's interesting that Julia, as talented as she is, I don't think you can credit Saturday Night Live for.
No. Saturday Night Live for Julia was the relationship with Larry David. And I was good friends with Larry, too. It's really sort of the three or four of us, because Larry was very unhappy there. And when Larry put his show together, Seinfeld, and they're looking for the girlfriend, he thought, Julia, my great friend from SNL. And the rest is history. That
is, when he was on, I read during one of the 3 years that you were there was a footnote said, the only time Larry David got a skit on Saturday Night Live. I had read, and I wanted to ask you about this. I think it was in this book, Live from New York.
Yes.
So that Larry came up with a lot of the ideas that eventually became Seinfeld episodes.
Oh, yes.
But nothing that he would pitch ever saw the light of day. One thing.
I think he got one on the show, but it was cut after dress rehearsal. He quit the show in the midst of it, but came back on Monday because he realized, wait a second, I'm making thousands of dollars every week. I'm just going to slip back into the writers' meeting, and nothing was ever said.
I think that was a Seinfeld episode.
Yes, and here's a Seinfeld episode too. And nope, you can believe me or not.
I believe you.
The rap party, the end of that season, the third season, when Larry was there, up top of the Rainbow Room, top of of Rockefeller Center, Larry comes up to me and says, I'm going to kill Dick Ebersol tonight. And he shows me a vial of liquid, and he might have said it was cyanide or something. I'm going to put this in his gin and tonic. I go, no, you're not. Yeah. And Dick was over there at the bar, and he's got his drink. And I'm thinking, he's just being Larry. He's just, But then I see Larry circling him. I'm thinking, am I being set up as the biggest buffoon in the world? Is he going to kill him, and now I'm an accomplice? I left the party and had a restless night. Obviously, Dick didn't die. It didn't happen. Years later, it's woven into a Seinfeld where George tries to kill his boss, right? And I realized I was front row center again at something. It was me, whether Larry remembers it or not, that he confided in, I'm going to kill Dick tonight with this vial of liquid.
Yeah, Gary, you've been a little too close to a couple murders for me. I'm going to slowly back away.
It is a little creepy if you think about it. And poor Chris Reeve has died. I'm just bad news. Howard Hessman, Jerry Lewis. Yeah.
Well, let's pivot real fast. As El Dorco, you got to make out with Jamie Lee Curtis. So
yes, I did.
You got that going.
El Dorco was, a character of mine from high school. And I thought a very broad character, but a very realistic character of someone who's just abused by everyone, is depantsed and things like that. But he always manages to get the girl. And in the first one, I start making out with Julia. Mary Gross is fighting for my attention, and I'm just making out between all of them. It went over really, really well. And so a couple weeks later, I said, Kroeger, can you come up with something with Jamie Lee Curtis? And I've got another little tidbit of history. So I did it with Jamie Lee Curtis, made up this win a date with Jamie Lee Curtis. El Dorco wins, and we make out, and she invites me to her hotel room. Right. A cute sketch. Well, El Dorco wears glasses, and she took my glasses off to kiss me. And you can see I went like this, because my glasses were off. She was so captivated by that acting choice of really looking like I couldn't see without my glasses. When you watch True Lies and her glasses come off, she does that. She goes cross-eyed.
She pulls a Kroeger.
And she pulled a Kroeger because she came up to me and she said, I love when you did that. That was an amazing choice. And I saw her do it on the big screen. When I write my book that no one buys, even my children, these stories are going to be in it. Whether anyone believes me or not.
I believe you. These are great stories. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever told anyone that. Maybe my wife, just to try to impress her when we were dating. Jamie Lee Curtis copied one of my little acting techniques. That's awesome. And Christopher Reeve stole your story.
Stole my story. Yeah. I have Ringo's ashes, which I have to clarify, cigarette ashes.
Cigarette ashes, right? Ringo is still alive.
He is still alive. He's still with us. I haven't killed him
yet. Gary's run, Ringo, run.
And I dined next to Robert Blake before he murdered his wife. So there you go.
There you go. Oh, but
stop the presses.
I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me. This was
fun.
This was fun. Wait, is there places on the social media people can keep up with you?
Well, I do a podcast, The Gary and Kenny Show. Kenny Seisler is a director, did a lot of Disney shows, did Comic Strip Live with me, a lot of specials, was one of the pioneers of MTV. But we're both a couple of middle-aged guys now, and we just call up people that we knew in the business, Brad Hall and Andy Breckman and whomever, friends of his, Mark Gordon, Chris Meldandri, and we talk about the business, try to keep it light and keep it funny, but really find out from people what they're doing, called The Gary and Kenny Show, which is on YouTube and podcast platforms. Otherwise, I have a blog, Gary Has Issues, which is political. I write a column I write the left point of view for various newspapers, monthly. So, and I'm open on Facebook. In other words, I don't have any restrictions. Anybody, psychopaths, anybody can read my stuff and socialize with me on Facebook.
Oh, the other note I had was you ran for the Iowa U.S. House of Representatives.
I ran for Congress first, and then I ran for the Iowa House of Representatives. I lost, but I was very proud of my campaign. I was very proud of what I was able to do. I got a few votes, but just not enough in a very conservative area. I think I made it clear that I'm relatively progressive, and I lost, but I don't regret it. Would I do it again? I heard your brain asking. No, it just costs too much money.
Expensive.
And it's because if I were running right now, Jeff, I would say, hey, I really enjoyed talking to you. Do you have $500 that you could contribute to my campaign? I mean, you can't say hi without soliciting money because it costs that much.
You know who else from Iowa was a political figure? From Fred Grandy, Gopher.
Fred Grandy, yes, in Sioux City, I believe. Yes,
yeah.
Gopher,
yeah.
I'm Gopher Light.
I had Gopher on my podcast. It was funny because...
Did you have Gopher? I like Fred. Now, he's very conservative, but...
We didn't get into politics per se, but as a joke, I read him some bills that he was a sponsor on. And then I read one that I completely made up. And he's like, I'm like, Fred, I made that up. And he's
I wish you could have done that with me. I probably would have. Yeah, well, Jeff, I made that bill up because I feel that hamsters really aren't getting the protection that they deserve.
Exactly.
Wheels have to stay oiled.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can't thank you enough. # my Reggie. This has been Gary Kroeger.
Yeah, I'm going to dig up that stuff. I'm going to watch Reggie on YouTube tonight.
You got to. It's all there. And it's beauty. Clearly taped on a VHS and uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think the part of it to look at and think what could have been was the potential future, because I think Archie would have ended up with Betty. That's my opinion. But I think you would have ended up with Veronica.
Well, nice thought.
Yeah.
I sure wanted to at the time.
So I think that's where it would have
Way
gone. But
back
they
then.
couldn't use it all up in the pilot. So anyway,
Thanks for asking me on. I really appreciate it.
it was such a pleasure. It was an honor. Thank you.
Peace out.
Peace out. All right, Gary Kroeger. How awesome was he, right? I mean, tell me the Ira Needleman DDS part of the conversation didn't give you a toothache and wanted you to get a cleaning right now. I know. Got me going too. Anyway, awesome stories. Loved every second of it. And we got an Alan Alda impression. So what more could you ask for? I know, right? All right, but definitely head over to YouTube and find the Archie show, Riverdale and Back. You'll love it. So fun. All right. Well, with the interview over, that can only mean one thing. That's right. It's time for another trending hashtag from the family of hashtags at Hashtag Roundup. Download the free Hashtag Roundup app. Free, never costs a penny. At the Google Play Store or iTunes App Store. Tweet along with us at Hashtag Roundup. And one day, one of your tweets may show up on a future episode of Classic Conversations. Fame and fortune await you. The hashtag for this episode is Hashtag SNL Bands. That's right, the ultimate Saturday Night Live band mashup. Brought to you by Musical Hashtags, a weekly game on Hashtag Roundup. Obviously, Hashtag SNL Bands, inspired by our guest, Gary Kroeger, who was on Saturday Night Live. There you go. All right, let's get to it. Without further ado, here are some Hashtag SNL Bands. Church Lady Gaga, the Talking Coneheads, the Bare Naked Church Ladies. These are some amazing Hashtag SNL Bands. Smashing David S. Pumpkins, Ace of Base and Gary, the Rolling Cones, Buckwheat Cherry, the Killer Bee Gees, Jimmy Fallon Eat World. Tweet your own Hashtag SNL Bands. Tweet, tag us at Jeff DeWaskin Show on Twitter. I'll show you some Twitter love. Hootie and the Land Sharks, Guns and Rosanna Diana, Laser Cat Stevens, Eddie Murphy and the Cruisers, Mr. Bill, Steely Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi and the Banshees, and our final Hashtag SNL Bands tweet, Bruce Springsteen and the in-house SNL Band. Oh, righty. That was a mighty fine batch of Hashtag SNL Bands tweets. They'll all be retweeted at Jeff DeWaskin Show. Go show them some love. Well, with the interview over and the hashtag over, it can only mean one thing. 150 episodes have come to a close. I want to thank Gary Kroeger for being my guest on the 150th. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week, 150 times each. If you're counting, it means the world to me. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.